Today's task force will focus on jobs and the mission, how to create them. Today's numbers show little progress in that mission. We have three expert voices assembled for our task force today. Christina Romer served as President Obama's chief economist for 2 years and is now professor of economics at University of California, Berkeley. Jason Schenker is president of Prestige Economics, and he is one of the most accurate predictors of payroll data in the world. He is a Bloomberg best. And Peter Cohan, president of Peter Cohan Associates, a management consulting and venture capital firm in the Boston area. He's also co-author of a new book called Capital Rising. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Street Smart. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to be with you.
Let's start off with the numbers here, because the data was weak today. 18,000 workers were added to payrolls in June. The unemployment rate inched back up to 9.2%, with now more than 14 million Americans out of work. And we were looking for, yesterday I was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. We were looking for more than 100,000 jobs. Jason, what happened?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think yesterday the market somewhat overreacted to the ADP number. A lot of people changed their estimates. I know we did not. Our number was slightly below the consensus. Today, what happened? This was a disappointing report by any stretch of the imagination, by any definition. And what you had was not only weak jobs for the month of June, a downward revision for the month of May. The participation rate went down. The unemployment rate went up. A very bad report, really, across the board. You have a confirmation of a soft patch and how that's now affected the labor market.
Dr. Romer, what do you think about the term soft patch? It's become one of the most popular terms, I think, on Bloomberg television and probably in Washington as well.
I think there's no question. I wanted to agree with Jacob. This is just simply a wretched jobs report, and it now is really 2 months in a row that we basically haven't created any jobs. And I think the other thing is it confirms a lot of the other numbers that we've been seeing, that it's not just in the employment numbers, it's the unemployment insurance numbers, it's the manufacturing numbers, it's the orders numbers. We just keep being disappointed. So it's unquestionably a soft patch or a slowing down, and that's certainly very troublesome.
Peter, what was your reaction? There was so much enthusiasm yesterday because of the ADP report, and then we obviously got a huge disappointment. What did you think?
Well, the ADP report is wrong a lot, so I wasn't all that surprised. But I think in general what I'm looking at is the fact that capacity utilization is below the long-term average. It's about 77%. And the long-term average is about 81%. So essentially, the businesses, the large businesses, have extra productive capacity. When they're, why do they need to hire? They're boosting productivity by 3.9%. Their unit labor costs are down 1.5%. They're squeezing workers, getting more out of them. They don't need to hire. Their earnings are expected to grow over 15% in the second quarter. They're doing great without hiring workers. So why hire?
So one of the people profiting from that, of course, is the Oracle of Omaha. I want to get to him right now in item 2 on our task force. Warren Buffett spoke with us this morning in an exclusive interview about hiring and the risk of another recession. Listen up.
I don't think so. No, I would bet very heavily against that. How fast the recovery will come, I don't know. But I see nothing that indicates any kind of a double dip. We have a number of our businesses, a majority of them, that every month they're getting better, and they're hiring. They're not hiring at huge rates, but if you looked at our 70-some businesses, all but 6 or 7 would be getting better.
Christina, what do you think about that? You were part of the team that helped bring us back to growth. Could we slip back down into contraction?
So I think Mr. Buffett's notion is probably the most likely, that growth will pick up, that we'll keep inching our way back. But I actually think a very important point is that, another shock could push us back down. So if Greece melts down, if the U.S. defaults on its debt, then it's a whole new ballgame, and that would be utterly devastating. So I think whether we slip back is really in our hands. It's in the hands of policymakers in Europe, and I think that's a very important point.
Peter, what do you think? You see job creation from the point of entrepreneurs. The administration is really hitting that as sort of the ace up their sleeve. Is it going to come back?
Well, if you look over the last 20 or 30 years and you look at the census statistics, small businesses, startup businesses, which I define as businesses that are less than 6 years old that are hiring, generally produce about 2 to 3 million jobs a year. Since the recession started in 2008, those 2 million businesses have not been hiring because there hasn't been enough economic growth to get them to hire. And there's been a lot of startup businesses which basically are people who can't find jobs. So that sector has definitely been weak. On the other hand, I've been talking to about 150 startup CEOs over the last 6 months for my new book. And what I found is very interesting is that I talked to one, for instance, called Hearsay Social, founded by some Stanford grads. And what's interesting about them is that they are doubling in size because they are making a product that helps businesses manage their reputation on Facebook and on social networks. There's demand there. So essentially, there are entrepreneurs out there coming up with products that are meeting demand, and they can't even produce enough of their products, so they need to hire more people. That's where we're going to get the job growth, is by creating new products that create tremendous demand because they're better than what's out there now.
Jason, he points out economic growth is key to job creation. Clearly, it's important. We were talking to David Rosenberg this morning. He thinks we could see another recession. Warren Buffett, on the other hand, disagrees. What do you think as one of the most accurate forecasters of jobs?
Well, I think that the probability of another recession or of a double dip, which is typically a smaller recession followed by a bigger recession, I think those probabilities are very, very low. And if we look at, say, the global economy, the rest of the economy looks great. And in the U.S., we look at growth and we're seeing, probably 2.5% GDP this year. It's not recession. It's not fabulous. The job market is lagging. It's a lagging economic indicator. The most important thing to keep in mind, too, is in 2001, we had the mildest recession in history. By some economic definitions, not even a recession. And, it took several years for the jobs to really begin to come back significantly. And right now, that might just be the reality, is it takes a while for these jobs to come back in an organic fashion. And at the same time, you've got massive job losses coming from the state and local governments. You run real risk there. But in the private sector, it's going to take a little while to come back.
Government has a problem, and that's item number 3 on our agenda. The debt ceiling, the president and Congress haggling over taxes and spending, which all have effects on job creation. Christina Romer, you have real Washington experience. What are your thoughts on the debt ceiling debate? Do we get an agreement?
I sure hope everybody is not only working all weekend, but they're staying up nights, because, I think one thing, when we talked about the soft patch earlier, I in general, haven't been a real proponent of the idea that uncertainty is what's holding us back. But I can tell you that the worry about the debt ceiling and the worry about default is, I think, taking a toll on confidence. I know it's taking a toll on my confidence. So, whether they can get to agreement, that I think is very hard to say. They're still very far apart. And so that makes me very nervous. I think, today's jobs report should, I think, motivate everyone to say, for heaven's sakes, we have just got to put our heads together and come up with something, because it's really getting desperate.
We've heard your assessments of the problem. We want to get to prescriptions for job creation. And Peter, I'm going to start with you as a venture capitalist, as someone overlooking small business creation. That's what we've been hearing from Steve Case, what we've been hearing from the president's task force. What do you think?
Well, I think that that's really where the jobs are created. The problem is that we allow thousands of people a year to come here, get their PhDs and master's degrees from MIT and Stanford, and then go back to China and India. What we ought to do is create startup visas that encourage them to stay here where they want to start businesses instead of going home. That's one thing we need to do. The other thing that we need to do, and this is a little trickier, is to encourage more businesses to export, because there may be a lot of businesses that feel that they've saturated their markets in the U.S. We need to make them feel more comfortable with the idea of exporting to either countries that are like the ones that they're used to selling into now, which will help them grow, or even to faster growing countries like China or India. And I'll just put in a plug for my new book with Frank Lavin, who used to be at the Commerce Department, called Export Now, which provides some prescriptions on how to do that.
You are always allowed to plug your books. We're boosting commerce here. Professor Romer, yes. What about your prescription? You say we need something concrete that's a tax cut or a stimulus, part of a bigger plan, and we need resolution on the debt ceiling as well.
Absolutely. So let me second, Peter's absolutely right. We want to encourage small businesses. We want to encourage exports. But we also need to get the macroeconomic sort of essentials going better, because the main reason firms aren't hiring, as we've already discussed, is there's just not demand for their products. And so I think certainly getting a resolution on the debt ceiling will help. I think, as part of that comprehensive plan, we absolutely should not do any austerity immediately. We should phase it in. And we should also have more support for the economy in the short run. So the president's talked about continuing the payroll tax cut for employees. I do something also for employers, maybe something that gives them a big tax cut if they actually hire, which is what we desperately want them to do.
So when Peter Orszag was saying this as well, you want to spend or give tax cuts now, but a resolution on the debt ceiling, it's counterintuitive to talk about those two things in the same sentence.
But they have to be part of the same package. I mean, I think if we just did fiscal stimulus now and not a solution on the deficit, again, I think people would rightly think we were out of control. But as part of a comprehensive package that deals with the deficit over time, you can absolutely have more support for the economy in the near term when it clearly desperately needs it.
All right, and Jason Schenker, you say we just have to take the pain and wait it out.
At the end of the day, there are four real ways that you can create jobs. You can engage in fiscal stimulus, and as you've already heard discussion about the debt ceiling, we're really already up against a wall on that. You can have accommodative monetary policy, and while maybe Ben Bernanke's statements last month had kind of popped the camel's nose under the tent for potentially increased quantitative easing in the future, it's very difficult to imagine the FOMC committee really going forward and allowing for a further quantitative easing. It can be very tough to imagine. At the same time, we could look at decreasing regulation, increasing tax cuts. Those don't really seem reasonable. And so the fourth thing is we've just got to wait for it.
All right, Jason, thanks so much for joining us. Jason Schenker here. Christina Romer, we appreciate you joining us. Peter Cohan, appreciate your time as well.